Welcome to A Slice of Life with Kellie and Jon. And today we have an international guest, Steve Barr, who lives in New Zealand. So you've come to us from, what time is it there? Right here it's well, Jon, it's your time at 7.
7:09 here in
My
New
time is
Jersey.
5. And what time is
I
it
live in the future. It's 11 in the morning on Sunday for me.
Sunday? And we're at
It's
Saturday.
Saturday night for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
So,
That's
but you're obviously not from New Zealand. Why don't you give us that little
yeah.
bit
How
of
did you end up in New
backstory
Zealand?
and
Yeah, sure.
tell us a little bit about your history with Barstow, California.
Oh, all right. My name is Steve Barr, and there's for anybody who's not from the Southwest America, there's a small town that's almost directly in between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. So people from LA going to Vegas for the weekend or whatever, they're going to be passing through a place called Barstow, which when 30, 40 years ago, it was a couple of gas stations and a 7-Eleven, and now it's this big sort of outlet mall place and every kind of fast food you can imagine. Barstow is our family history, the family lore is that Barstow is short for Barr's Town. And the Barr family was traveling across the desert, the Mojave Desert in Death Valley, on one of those prairie schooner covered wagons, and either the axle broke or the ox died or whatever. And there was a little oasis. And we said, you know what? We're done. This is it. We're going to just stop here in the
Sounds a
middle of
little
the
bit like
desert.
sounds a little bit like Waiting for Guffman,
Yeah, exactly right.
where
Exactly
they
right.
got halfway across the country and said, "I smell salt water. This is it."
We're here, done. And what it always gets to me though is that if my forefathers had just a little bit more balls, the thing that we now call Bel Air might be called Barstow, and I would be worth a lot more money.
There you go.
Oh, that's an interesting story, though. Your family started in
Yeah,
Barstow. Very interesting.
yeah. Now it
Okay,
might
so
not actually be true, but that's just what
it's
I'm
a
growing
great
up
story.
hearing.
So
Yeah.
somehow your family, or at least you, made it to
Mm.
Los Angeles, where I met you.
Yeah. I was born in Fontana, which is a small town in Southern California. But then when I was 2 or 3 or 4, my folks moved to San Jose, which is Silicon Valley, sort of the center of California. And I was there for high school. And then I moved down when I turned 18. And I went to college at USC, University of Southern California. Sorry, I've been living in New Zealand for so long that I don't know what Americans know anymore. I'm used to explaining things like USC to New Zealanders because they've never heard of it. The So I went down there for school. I actually went to acting school at USC. I thought I was going to be an actor, and I went through a 4-year program, which was very expensive. And I graduated and really quickly learned that I'm an average white dude. And there are thousands of me, and I'm not good enough looking to be a leading man. I'm not weird enough looking to be a character guy. I'm just right in that middle group that doesn't get hired. So I spent a couple of years doing bad auditions for bad projects. And a lot of those projects that were getting made, we'd get the sides, which is like the audition scripts, and they were terrible. They were just terrible, and yet the movies were getting made. And so I thought, well, maybe I should write instead. So I teamed up with another average white guy actor named Danny Grossman. He and I wrote our first script together, which was terrible. And then we wrote a few more, and I did some solo stuff, and he did some solo stuff, and I started teaming up with other people because I really like co-writing. Somewhere in there, Jon and I met at a place called Script Rights, which is a sort of a weekly workout for writers and actors to come in and cold read scripts. And I sold my 13th feature screenplay to Disney, and joined the Writers Guild of America 3 months before the 2007 Writers Guild strike. So I got my big break at exactly the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
And all the momentum from that sale was sucked out by the strike. And so when that writing period stopped, because there was a contractual period to it, and they never ended up making the movie, I became a what's called a development executive, which is like a low-level producer at a production company, doing a whole lot of reading and meeting with writers and producers and directors for my boss, who was a very successful Austrian commercials maker who was going to come and fix Hollywood. because a lot of people get really successful outside of Hollywood and decide I'm going to go fix Hollywood, and Hollywood accepts them in, takes all their money, and then sends them home. And so I did that for a while, and then my wife got invited to a veterinary school in New Zealand, and New Zealand has one of the top vet schools in the whole world. And so we had never been here. We'd seen a little movie about some short guys with a ring and a volcano. Um, and we thought that looks nice. As long as we avoid the orcs, we're going to be okay. So we moved to New Zealand in 2010. The idea was always that we were going to, it's a 5-year program, so it's kind of a master's and a doctorate all at once. And in 2015, when she graduated and she was a working vet, we'd move back to California. I would get back into the movie making thing there, and she could sell horse tranquilizers to Lindsay Lohan. That was the plan. And but when 2050 came around, she graduated. We, in that 5 years, we kind of fallen in love with New Zealand. It's the quality of life here is really good. It's sort of, my mom came in and visited, and she was born in England, and she said New Zealand reminds her of England in the 1950s, except they have modern technology and they're not afraid of gay people or brown people. And she really liked that. So it's really cool here. So we're here kind of for the foreseeable future. And I've written a couple of movies, I've produced a couple of movies, and I'm just coming off of 4 years being the commissioner of drama and scripted comedy for TVNZ, which is the national broadcaster. So I've been a TV exec for 4 years.
Wow. So in New Zealand then, are the TV shows different than America? Like we wouldn't recognize them, we wouldn't know them. It's like
sure, you might recognize one or two, but the thing to remember is that our entire television output is less than 2% of the production budget of the BBC. So we only make maybe 40 hours of scripted content and maybe 100 hours of unscripted content in a year. So everything we make has to be as good as the top 80% of what gets made in America, because Americans make so much stuff that a lot of it is made and isn't very good and just sort of disappears, but then you get to keep making stuff. And here, in order to keep making stuff, you have to make really good stuff. So I've worked in the film and television industries in Hollywood studio and Hollywood indie, which are a lot of the same people, but different businesses, China and New Zealand. And the New Zealand filmmakers are pound for pound the best, most talented people I've worked with, because they come up through a system where there's just no money. So they have to figure out how to do 2 or 3 jobs themselves. And what in America would be a crew of 100 people is done by a crew of 30 people here, and they're all helping each other out because they don't have the sort of 100 years of labor and management trying to screw each other over in Hollywood means that the unions have to be very, very protective of their roles. And here there aren't really unions because you don't have to worry that if somebody helps you wrap a cable, you're going to get fired, because they're just going to have that guy wrap cables from now on for cheaper. So the TV system here is really good, but also still kind of a cottage industry. We're making New Zealand shows for New Zealanders. You might recognize one thing that's found its way over to America kind of recently called Wellington Paranormal, which is in the same story universe as What We Do in the Shadows, which was an indie movie that got turned into an American television show. And this is sort of a spin-off of that, based in Wellington, of a couple of Kiwi cops dealing with supernatural stuff. But the New Zealand sort of national personality of New Zealand is anything that happens, you're like, oh, that's interesting. Everything is very low key. Nobody gets very excited about anything. And so the joke of Wellington Paranormal is they're dealing with vampires and zombies and stuff. And you don't see that every day. And that's sort of the nature of comedy here.
Huh. Wow. Yeah. Who would know, here in America. So in New Zealand, do you see a lot of American TV and movies?
Oh yeah, certainly. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of American TV. There's a reason why I still have an American accent. I've been here for 14 years and I still sound American because the television sounds like me. But that does, New Zealand is still officially part of the United Kingdom, I think ish. They didn't do an independence from the crown. So they still have the king. Like this weekend is the king's birthday celebration. It's still a thing here. And so a lot of the content that they get here, a lot of the entertainment they have here is English rather than American. And so a lot of the English TV and movies make their way over here as well. And there's a real difference there because a lot of English stuff is more aligned with the New Zealand sort of stiff upper lip, everything's not a big deal sort of thing, where American stuff tends to be a lot more sort of spectacular and broader and like more obvious in its joke, more obvious in its drama, that sort of stuff.
Fascinating.
Mm.
How does one go about, like you told us a little bit how you got to where you are, but what if you didn't skip the acting and sounds like it was some of it kind of accidental, or was there a set way to get to be a producer or what you do?
Sure. Yeah. I think there's the entertainment industry is so chaotic and so not meritorious that it's hard to have a real plan. You can have strategies, but having a plan implies that you have some control of what's going to happen and that you don't. And so my strategy, and there are different strategies that work for different people, because of my personality and kind of the hustle culture mentality that I have, for better or worse, is I've always been like, I'm not very talented. I'm just really smart and I work hard. And so my job, my strategy with my job is to always be having 15 things going at once, because I can't control if any of them are going to go, because 800 things have to go right for any project to get up. And I have control of maybe 50 of those 800 things. So I'm going to control the 50 things that I can control and do the best possible job I can. And then not get too concerned about what happens to it after it leaves my hands, because then I really can't do anything about it. So any anxiety I have about it is not going to be useful to me. And so I try to maintain, there's like a positive level of anxiety that gets you to accomplish things and finish things and hit deadlines and all that sort of stuff. So you need a little bit of stress in your life. But as soon as that stress is not actually helping you do positive stuff, it's hurting you. Right. And so a big part of my process is to have enough things going on that whenever the ball is out of my court and I'm waiting on answers from other people, because this business has a lot of waiting around for other people to give you answers, which are usually no, then I've got something else to work on. So I'm not sitting around and just waiting. And part of having so many things to work on is also, and I've only realized this in the last few years, that it's actually a defense mechanism. Because if something falls apart and it wasn't my fault, if that's the only thing I had and I've been working on it for 10 years and suddenly it falls apart, that is absolutely heartbreaking. But if it's one of 15 things and I'm just a little bit too busy to be comfortable and something falls apart and it's not my fault, I'm actually a little bit relieved, you know?
Right.
And then you would think that I would go, oh, I was a little bit too uncomfortably busy. And then that fell apart and it's off my radar now. So I don't have to worry about it. So maybe I'll just focus on these 14 things now and then have some work-life balance. Because I've heard of that as a thing. I don't know what that is. But then, of course, always something else comes along that's really cool and interesting. And I'll jump on that. And now I have 15 things and I'm a little bit too busy again. Yeah. To answer the producer question, there's a few different ways that people become producers. And just like there are really like 15 different jobs that are called producer, but they're different skill sets and mindsets and all sorts of stuff. And I'm one of those producers that came in saying, wow, I know all of these really smart, creative people are just not getting any traction anywhere. What the hell? That sucks. I wonder if I could help them. And so because I come from a history, I worked when I was doing all that, the screenwriting, and I made like 50 short films, which was like my film school. At that time, I was working at Universal Studios in a legal department, the department called Labor Relations. It's all union contracts and negotiations and stuff. And I'm not a lawyer, but just from being around there for 9 years or whatever it was, I'm familiar with lawyer language and I understand why contracts work the way they do and that sort of stuff. And so I've become kind of a like I'm a good creative producer. I'm a decent business affairs producer. and I'm a terrible production producer, like line producer. And so what'll happen is I'll meet people who've got really great stories that they want to tell, and they might be a writer, they might be a director, they might be a writer director, and I'll be like, "This is a great story. I don't know if I can sell it, but I think it's really cool. Let me go and start talking to people about it." And if there have been times where just in talking to people, I've been able to hook creative people up with producers who are in a better situation to actually get that thing done. And one of the things that'll happen a lot of times in the Hollywood system is just by making that introduction and maybe putting 10 hours of my life into something, I'll insist on a producer credit and a share of profits. I think that's bullshit. I think, I just connected two cool people and they're going to make something awesome. Invite me to the premiere. I'm going to step out now. You guys go do your thing. Because I don't want to, I've been on the other side of that so many times, and there are so many people who aren't actually bringing value to a project, and yet they're insisting on a bunch of shit just because they made a connection somewhere. So I don't do that. When I do stay involved in something, I'm trying to always figure out, how am I helping this project? How am I adding value to this project? So working with people who have skill sets that I don't is something that I really enjoy. Like, this is a really complicated art form that we do, and no one person can do it all. And if you don't like working with other people who think differently than you do, and so are going to disagree with you about stuff, if you don't like that, then you shouldn't be doing this. You should be doing something else that you can do on your own. But I enjoy that sort of robust debate, and I enjoy watching people who are good at stuff that I'm not good at do their thing. And I'll be trying to learn from them all the time, while I'm also trying to do the thing that I do well to try to improve everything and make the output better and the audience experience as good as it could be.
Yeah,
Well,
that's awesome.
I'll throw in a little something there. Steve had said something earlier. I'm not going to agree with when he said that something that he didn't have the talent to do something, but he was smart enough to be able to do it. When I met Steve and we were in this writers group, he was the best of the screenwriters there. He was certainly one of the most respected. There were a couple of other guys there who had put more years in than Steve, but and they were very talented. But Steve, he just seemed to have the knowledge. And after I wrote the original manuscript for The Boss, I went to Steve and I said, "Steve, my attorney's saying I need to turn this into a screenplay. And you're the best writer I know. And so would you partner with me on this?" And he was like, "Jon, this is really your story. You need to write it, but I will be there every step of the way to help you." So, I mean, he's the one who told me, go out and buy Final Draft. Go out and buy the Screenwriter's Bible. And he was with me. I mean, and Steve will attest to this. My problem when I first wrote the screenplay for The Boss, it was 270 something pages.
It really was. Yeah.
And he said, "No, Jon, you have to shorten this." And I said, "Well, by what? By what? Like 20 pages?" And he says, "No, about 160, but he was with me every step of the way to help me chop that down to the 118 pages that I think it is today. And he taught me all of the guidelines, all of the things I needed to know. And when Steve left that writers group, unfortunately, the older people there, one passed away and one decided to start a different group. But the quality of that group just fell down so much. It just fell to the bottom that even I said, I don't even know if I want to be a part of this group. I'm going to now release my book. So even though in one way or another, Steve was not just helpful with me writing the screenplay. And then shortly after that, and again, I even hated the idea that Steve was moved at that point. What is it? 6,000 miles from LA, Steve? New Zealand?
Yeah.
Okay. I hated that he moved that far away, because now my attorney had gotten me into becoming being a script doctor because of the knowledge and talent that Steve taught me. I was now earning a very good income. Also, it, like Steve also said, it was and it was after that writer's strike, so we were sort of, I was sort of lucky, but but and I'll even tell you, I ventured back into that writers group about a year ago just to see what was going on, and maybe I'd tweak a couple of my scripts, but the quality was not there like it was when Steve was there and all those other people. Now it seemed that the writers group now, and maybe with other groups, but the one that we were part of, it's now more of a social thing. It's more of friends getting together and not telling each other what's wrong with their scripts, but blowing smoke up their asses and making them feel, oh, that's the most wonderful thing I've ever heard. I love that script. I can't believe it. And meanwhile, what's on the page is not formatted correctly. The words are, there are typos on everywhere, but nobody seemed to care about that. But when Steve was a part of the group, it really came down to making us all the best we could possibly be. So I really do have to sort of, in one way, thank Steve that if he didn't move to New Zealand, I wouldn't have started putting out the books, my book. And then, of course, while Steve was in LA, I remember the day distinctly, Steve. We were up at the Mulholland House, and Steve had just recently signed his deal with Disney for his movie called Plant Life that he co-wrote, and got a very nice check, if I remember. And that's when he said, "I'm done working. I'm going to be a professional writer." And so here I was with the script for The Boss, my first script, unknown guy in town. And I wrote a script that, if you remember the director that we had played with for a while, he had a budget done on it, and it came in at about $24 million. Now, this was quite a while ago. And so here I was, this unknown guy with a $24 million script. Plant Life, I think you said, was budgeted at like $100 million or something.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah.
At that time. And so nothing was happening. But we were up at the Mulholland House, he and I hanging out and talking about one of the Saw movies, Saw 2, Saw 1, Saw something, that was made for $50,000 and opening week made 30 million or some ridiculous amount of money. And here we were going, what are we doing wrong? We're trying to write really good movies. And people are writing, sorry if the people who made Saw watch this, but people who are writing and making low budget stuff like this, slasher movies like this, are pulling in millions every weekend. What can we do, Steve? So we decided to write a low budget horror mafia movie called Deadfellas. And Steve and I wrote that. And of course, everybody who read it loved it, except the zombie genre is dead. Now, to just say the zombie genre is dead is a, what is that? It's like zombies don't die. So how could the zombie genre be dead? Contradiction in terms. That's what I was looking for. They all love it, but nobody bought it at that time. So a few years later, I said, Steve, I think I want to turn it into a book, which I did. And we can only hope that someday some producer will read the book and go, hey, this would make a great screenplay. And then Steve and I can go, here you go.
Well, here you go.
We got it. Yeah, already done.
But anyway, so that's my take on Steve Barr and how influential he was in my life and helping me during the great years that I made a lot of money in LA as a script doctor. It was thanks to this guy, for sure.
Awesome.
My pleasure. My
Both
pleasure.
of you, because, well, Jon, you're not in Hollywood anymore either, but how do you guys think the business has changed as far as developing projects and getting them
It's
made?
broken. It's there's a whole process depending on how many hours we have, but I'll try to give you like the 30-second or 45-second thing. And I don't, this is, you talk to a lot of different people in a lot of different places. So not everybody who listens to you already kind of knows about how Hollywood works, right?
Right.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So Hollywood's been around for about 100 years, and they've always been really good at finding sources of dumb money and then burning through that money, skimming off the top, and then sending that money home. And in the 80s, they were taking a lot of German money, and then the Germans figured out that they were losing money while Hollywood was making money, and they stopped. And the next thing that Hollywood went to, at the same time as the corporatization of Hollywood, is they started going to Wall Street. And Wall Street has a requirement of, we need to be able to skim 10 or 20% off the top of whatever business that we're part of. That's the point of Wall Street. And so Hollywood started having to find that money from somewhere, and a lot of it was from shortchanging creatives. And so that started sort of a downward slope. But at the time, it was okay, because in the 80s and 90s, we had home video, and home video made a lot of money. And you didn't have to be very good, because there was just such a great marketplace with DVDs and that sort of thing. Then along comes, about 10 years ago, Silicon Valley decided to get involved. And if Wall Street has a thing of going in and sort of becoming a leech on an industry, Silicon Valley goes in and is an arsonist of industries.
Oh.
They have this thing where they their whole sort of ethos is disruption. We're going to go disrupt an industry and then figure out how to make profit off of the disruption. What often happens, though, is often that disruption, they don't actually have a plan. They're just going to break some stuff and then see what they can make out of chaos. Chaos is a ladder. Chaos is profit. And so Netflix, which had been just a mail order DVD distribution company, turned into what is now called streaming. And they never were profitable. They were building debt for 10 years. But that's the Silicon Valley model, which is borrow up to your eyeballs in order to corner a market. And then once the market is cornered, after 10 years, and 10 years is a sort of the standard thing, then you stop caring about how many people are coming into your business and how many people are obligated to you, and you start worrying about making profit off those people. And so you build a lot of debt for 10 years, and then you start turning the things that you bought with that debt into assets that you can then exploit to make profits. Netflix turned 10 last year, and they started caring about profit. And in that time, along with a bunch of other stuff, the Wall Street stuff was still happening, and also all the studios were seeing the hype that Netflix was getting, and like, oh no, we can't allow them to corner this market. They can't have a monopoly on this, so we have to build our own streaming services. So they all started borrowing like crazy from Wall Street to do the same thing. And so everybody's leveraged to death. Everybody has so much debt, and there's no possible way to turn a profit off of the business model that's going on right now. And the only way they could even look at all likely is to stop paying the people who actually make stuff very well. And so, like screenwriters, for example, movie screenwriters and television screenwriters, when you take interest into account, have had a 25% pay cut in the last 10 years. And so that, and the evolution of AI and a couple of other things, is what caused the actors and writers strikes last year, which were coming from the legacy Hollywood studio had gotten bamboozled by the pyramid scheme of streaming. And they were all starting to realize, oh, wait, this is not sustainable, and we're never going to dig ourselves out of this hole. How do we do it? Well, we got to screw over the people who actually make the work. Mm-hmm. And by then, the actors and the writers were like, no, we can't. If we don't stop this now, you will not be able to be a professional screenwriter or actor. It's always going to be a side gig, because you just can't make a living at it anymore. And so now that the strikes are over. There might be another set of strikes this year because the crew union, which is called the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, and the drivers union, which is the Teamsters, their contracts are coming up this year, and they supported the writers and the actors in their strike. They were very helpful in those, and so the writers and the actors are probably going to help them in their negotiations. And if it comes to a strike, the writers and actors are probably going to help with that as well. And that's just more and more disruption off of something that was always kind of a shit fight of push and pull between labor and management for the first 80 years of Hollywood. And in the last 20 or 30 years has just kind of collapsed because first Wall Street and then Silicon Valley have taken processes that kind of worked okay and just disrupted them and broken them. And we don't know yet what the next thing is going to be and how we can get back to sustainability.
Yeah, AI, they're saying, is going to take over so many industries in the next 5 years. But from my experiences with it, I mean, Chat GPT, for example, it's just pulling already written material. It's not original. It's just
it's a plagiarism machine.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. It's a plagiarism machine. Yeah.
I'm in marketing, so I do use it for my newsletters.
Right.
And when I need an image, I go to one of those image creators, and they're just not, you can tell, like, it's not real looking. I mean, they're getting better. They're getting better every month. Like every time I try a new one, it's better. But sometimes so they will advance and they will be more real. And then of course you can make videos with people talking, creative characters talking and stuff. So you have to wonder, I don't know. I mean, what will we be able to tell? Will we get that same, you know, how a great actor really emotes? Are we going to be able to get that through AI? I don't know. We'll see what happens. But
probably not. But some combination of AI with a human endeavor is probably going to be the thing. The challenging and frustrating thing is whenever there's been a new technology that affects the creative industries, at first it's used by creative people to make their jobs easier, and then it's used by the people who have the money on the top to fire creative people.
Yep.
And every time that happens, that's what happens. And so I don't know how we don't do that, because that's just a pattern that exists in how capitalism works. And I'm not an anti-capitalist. It's just that's one of the unfortunate things about the
we have to admit its weaknesses. It just has weaknesses.
Yeah. And so the only way around it is to have something that pushes against the efficiency drive of modern corporations, because what Wall Street will call efficiency is really the fewest number of people doing the most possible work and having no slack in the system, and burning the hell out of people and until they have mental breakdowns, and then firing them and replacing them with somebody else. And that's sort of how lots and lots of the jobs in Hollywood work now, which is 15-hour work days. You're driving home asleep, you have a car accident and die, and they're like, oh, that's real sad. Well, let's do give a little and send some money to their family and then hire somebody else. And it happens in post-production. It happens all the time. And it's just taking the slack out of systems leads to broken workers, the people who are actually doing the work. We need a system with a little bit of slack, but slack is not profit. Profit comes from no slack.
And the work is inferior. It's not.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, like the point you said before about the really brilliant actor. Yes, I absolutely agree that really brilliant actors can elevate content. There are plenty of movies with mediocre acting that make money. And so the people who are involved in Hollywood, not for the art, not for the culture, not for the anything, if they're there to make money, they're not going to care.
Yeah.
They'll get mediocre stuff.
But as a society, we are suffering. I mean, they did it to our journalism industry, to newspapers.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And absolutely. You know, it's demand. People want to read the newspaper on their phone, but now it's free. I bring that up because I was managing newspapers, so I experienced it.
Right.
And I saw the downfall and how they're making everybody do multiple jobs and cutting the staff, and then the paper's getting thinner and thinner and fewer pages, and then the locals are like, we're not going to buy this, there's nothing in here. But you still have to sell the advertising, because that's really all they care about, is getting the advertising dollars. But how do you sell an ad in a paper nobody reads? And so it's just a spiral downward, and then it hurts our society. especially with newspapers. Like now we don't have informed population because people don't have
Mm.
news, you know,
Well-
that they can trust, that they can rely on. And like you said, the profit makers are the ones, they don't care about the quality of the product. They only care that somebody will pay for it. What will somebody buy? You know, whether it's inferior product or something that's got trickery or drama,
Yeah.
to stir up drama. You know,
Clickbaity
it's not
stuff.
true.
Well,
So
Yeah.
sad to see that happen. And Hollywood has done so much for the culture, even though it's, you know, can be argued that it's not always been great and up, but it's sad to see it go downhill.
what I saw happen in my little time that I was out there, and Steve and I touched on it before, was around 2007 with the writers' strike. By that time, I had met quite a few of the older writers who were constantly trying to get stuff made, and the writers' strike came along, and that was I think at that time it was the longest strike they had ever had, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
think it might be, yeah.
And it really hurt a lot of people who were living in LA who were writers and trying to just do their regular jobs. And I remember a few of them were like, you know, I don't really need this. I can go back to Omaha and work on the newspaper. I've been out here in Hollywood for 25 years. I've owned my craft.
Yeah.
I can go back there as the guy who worked in Hollywood for 25 years and get a job at the local paper, writing an article and being happy the rest of my life. And another guy was, yeah, and I'm going to go back to Wichita, and I'm going to go back to Indianapolis, and I'm going to go back here and there. And they did. And they got the jobs on the papers for about 2 or 3 years. And then the papers dried up because everything started going to the internet. And that wasn't their forte. And it didn't. And now, and
Well, you have to transition. That's how I transitioned into marketing. I mean,
Yep.
marketing's always been a natural for me anyway. Everything I've done, all my management positions were about marketing the business and bringing in more revenue. But it just was a natural transition for me to go from being the general manager of a newspaper in charge of everything to marketing, which is revenue generating. Again, kind of same thing. So I think we also all have to learn in this culture to transition. Take your skills, take your talents, move it to something else, make it work. I do feel blessed. I feel lucky that I ended up in these positions, but I think Hollywood, yeah, a lot of people and a lot, even back in the day when it was really productive, strong industry, a lot of people still didn't make it because there's not room for everyone that wants to make it in that industry. And we've talked about musicians, same with music.
right.
Not everybody wins. It's a gamble you're taking it if you're in the creative industries. So I feel like we need more support for that, though, more support for people that are willing to take those risks so that they don't end up falling on their face with nothing and end up walking away with nothing.
Well, during the last writers' strike, which happened relatively recent, Steve decided to take on a new career. Why don't you tell us about your new career?
What is that?
Is this the stand-up you're talking about?
Yes, I am. I didn't know the other career.
Yeah. So for the last 4 years, I've been working at a TV station, the national broadcaster called Television New Zealand. There's only 3 television companies in New Zealand. It's the whole population is 5 million people. So it's like Austin, Texas having their own national television. And because it's such a small community here, creative community, I couldn't do any of my own creativity. I couldn't write. I couldn't produce stuff. Every once in a while, people ask me to act and stuff, and they didn't need a middle-aged white guy who sounds American. And I couldn't do any of that stuff while I was at TVNZ because it would have been a conflict of interest because the community here is so small, and I was a decision maker, a kind of a gatekeeper, for lack of a better word. And so I couldn't do anything that might mean I owed favors to anybody. And yet I still had this creative itch, like this drive to go to, and I was finding myself getting real restless. And it's, like the meth guy who's Like I want to take the edge off, you know. And so I came across, you know, I've always liked listening to stand-up comedy. And really, when you think about a stand-up comedian, particularly the ones who are doing like the hour-long shows, they are writer, performer, directors. They're doing the whole thing. And some stand-ups have a director who will work with them to give a new set of eyes. But a lot of times, especially if you're coming up through the gig circuit, you are your own director, you're your own technician, you're definitely your own writer, and you are your own performer. And you get to have that immediate response. If you're not certain if a joke works, the audience is gonna tell you whether or
Yeah.
not the joke works. Where in film and television, you write a joke and then you get people to perform it, and then you have to wait a year and a half or 2 years to find out if the joke worked, you know. And so I started, actually I had my first couple of sets in 2009, and then this thing happened in early 2020. You might have remembered there was a pandemic. New Zealand, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, had one of the best responses in the world. And for about 9 months, we didn't have COVID in this country because we stamped it out early and stamped it out often. But that means that in the big city, Auckland, which has almost half of the entire population of the country, is in this one city. And we had to lock down. We weren't going out and going into public, that sort of stuff, unless you're an essential worker. And so the sort of opportunities for a beginner stand-up weren't around because I was going to open mics and that sort of stuff. Nobody was hiring me for corporates or anything. But then when we came out of lockdowns, went back into it, I got into like a national competition for amateur comedians, and I got into the finals of that, the raw competition. And from that, I've been able to go and just sort of do gigging kind of comedy ever since. And yeah, it's great because if I come up with something that in the past I would have written a short film or something about, which then would have been a real pain in the ass to try to get made and cost money and ask for favors and all sorts of stuff. And now basically whatever the nugget of the short film was, whatever the sort of the premise of the short film was, if it was a comedy short film, I just basically become a storyteller and I go up and tell whatever the thing that was amusing to me about the short film, I just restructure it in a sort of thing that a stand-up comedian can say. And I get up and I do my best to make people giggle on Friday and Saturday night.
That's fun. Yeah, that's got to be a hard gig, from everything I've heard about. You know,
it's tough. You hear this statistic, and I have no idea if it's actually true, but public speaking is the biggest fear that people have, more than dying. I'm not certain I believe that's actually true. But anybody who says to me, "Oh, that's so brave. I don't know how I can do that. How can you get up on stage in front of people? How can you try to make them laugh?" And like, the worst thing that can happen is people don't laugh at you. And I've been trying to get people to stop laughing at me my entire life. So it's a win-win for me.
Yeah, I don't know. It's worse than even public speaking, I would think, because public speaking, you can just get up and talk. But
yeah, sure,
you have to be funny if you're a comedian. And to hear that dead air, that dead silence would be awful. So yeah,
it's the same reason why people jump out of airplanes, though. That I'm pretty sure my chute's going to open, but if it doesn't, all right, I had a good run. So you're fooling your body into feeling you're actually in danger when you really aren't. You know, I've been in more danger working in bars than I have standing up in front of people in bars and trying to tell jokes to them.
Yeah, at least you're not going to get hurt. Just your exactly. Ego, I guess, your feelings. Anyway, I had to pick up my dog because she's sticking her nose up under my pant leg and licking my legs, and it's tickling me. So I had to pick her up because it's irritating.
Well, that's a new one for the podcast. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, what the hell?
So, Steve, before we close, why don't you tell us a little joke or a little story that will amuse us?
Yeah.
Oh, you're a comedian. Tell me a joke. Yeah,
one of those.
Not a cliche at all.
No, not at all.
But it's out of context, so it might not be.
Yeah, exactly. So that's like, there's a thing in the sort of the semiotics of comedy of a street joke, which is different from a joke. Most modern comedians don't do like your Rodney Dangerfield setup punchline stuff. It's a longer narrative that has to have context to it, and that's not really appropriate for this kind of
Right.
thing.
And we're not drinking, John.
Oh,
So
well, and we're not
gonna-
drinking.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta get
Exactly.
your audience
I
a
guess
little
I could tell
tipsy.
you a street joke. Oh, can I do a little bit that I do when I teach at film schools,
Yeah.
which is three bad jokes,
Okay.
and it's about knowing your audience and having respect for your audience. So I'm going to tell you three bad jokes. One of them is actively offensive, and I apologize in advance for everybody listening, but I got to make an offensive joke in order to make the point. So joke number one is what does a goose? No, let's do knock knock. Let's do knock knock. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Who's there?
Banana.
Banana who?
Banana who?
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Not who's there?
Banana.
Banana
Banana who?
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Orange.
Aren't you glad I didn't say banana?
Yeah,
Come on,
great.
Steve. That was from
Okay,
what?
terrible
That was from
Terrible joke.
4
Let me
years
make my
old.
point. Let me make my point.
Terrible.
Okay, joke number two is if you want to connect the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, and electromagnetism, you really got to go with your gut. So if you're a physicist, there's a thing called the Grand Unified Theory, GUT, which is trying to put together the physics of all these different things that currently we don't know how they relate to each other.
Right.
Okay, so joke number three. What's the best part of having sex with 43-year-olds? There are 40 of them.
Oh.
Okay, so apologize. I'm a bad person for even knowing that joke.
Here you go. Here you go,
Right?
Steve, and then we'll wrap it up. You can use
No, let me
it.
make my point. Let me make my
Oh,
point.
okay,
The
go
reason
ahead.
I said three bad jokes is there are a lot of different. The film and television is art, and artists need to care about their own art, but it's also the most expensive art form that humans have invented yet. And if you're making something expensive, you have to care about who's going to pay for it, or else you don't get to keep making it. And if you were to walk into a room and for some reason you had a brain injury, so you only knew those three jokes, but you saw there was some 9-year-olds, some freshman physics students at MIT, and a bunch of assholes, you would kind of know who to tell which joke to, right? Just sort of naturally, you would understand that some audiences will respond to some things better than other audiences as well. And so whenever I talk to people who are getting into this business, I'm like, that if you decided not to tell the pedophilia joke to the 9-year-olds, would you be a bad person? Would you be selling out your art? No, of course you wouldn't be. You'd be doing what people do naturally, which is understanding who the hell you're talking to. And so if you are an artist, if you are trying to be working in the film and television industry, it's not bad for you to care who you're talking to and tell them the things that they will receive well. That's not you being untrue to your art. That's not selling out. That's just doing what people do. And so you asked me about a joke. You're just trying to wrap up on a laugh. And I did a little freaking film school 101 lecture. That's part of my first lecture that I do. Because I'm just a pedantic motherfucker, is what I am.
No,
sorry.
I think it's good advice though, because a lot of people, especially the musician world, they're like, we don't want to sell out. We want to stick to, whatever the genre. And if you enjoy making it and you're creative and people want to listen to it, go for it, and you made a bunch of money on it. That's okay. But some people, they get caught up on, they don't want to commercialize what they're doing.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's a job.
It's a whole lot easier to make art if you're not worried about how you're going to pay your electricity bill.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah. True. So
I was first of all, it was great seeing you again.
Great seeing you.
And I'm really happy that we got to share your story with the people in the audience, because I think that what you've done over the time that I've known you, and I've known you since 1999.
Has it been that long? Wow. Yeah.
The first week of June, 1999.
Wow.
It was a month after I got to LA. And it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me was meeting you. So
that's really kind, John. Thank you very much.
I'm grateful for that. So here's the joke that you could tell. You can
Yep.
Okay. And I'm sure I probably have told it to you in the past, because it's one of the quick short ones. Guy comes home from work, finds his wife packing a suitcase. He says to her, "Where are you going?" She goes, "Found out that I'm leaving you." She says, "I found out that what I do for you, I could make $1,000 a night in Las Vegas." So the guy goes to his closet and he takes out his suitcase. He starts throwing clothes in it. She goes, "Where are you going?" He says, "I'm going to Vegas too. I want to see how you can live on $2,000 a year."
Oh, that's silly.
There you go. So
Very
with that,
good.
close it up, Kelly.
Well, yeah, and thank you for sharing your story. And again, I think the lesson of this podcast is learning how to pivot when things change. If you move somewhere else or whatever, just learn to adjust, learn to be flexible, learn new skills, and just go with what. Don't get a puppy. I'm ready to put an ad in the paper. I keep threatening her. I'm like, I'm putting an ad in the paper. But anyway, yeah, just learn to pivot and learn to adjust to whatever life throws at you, because the world's changing so quickly and industry's changing now with AI, everything's changing. And I think some people, they just get stuck. And I have a friend recently who's moving to another state, and it's a couple, they've lived in the same place for 30 years. And I'm like, oh, I've lived all over the country. It's like a new lifetime. Every time you move to a new place, it's like a new rebirth. And every time you change careers, it's like something brand new.
Yep.
Sorry. I apologize for the dogs. But anyway, so I think that your message and sharing your story might inspire some people that are maybe a little nervous, a little scared to try something different or new, might be willing more, embrace it. Because sometimes you just have to. It's not even your choice. You just have to embrace doing something different, something new, and spreading out what you know, and taking what you know and going in a different direction.
You're there
to
15 years.
paraphrase a cliche.
You're there 15 years. I'm sure 18 years ago, you never would have said, "I'm probably going to live in New Zealand someday."
Not at all. Not at all.
And look what happened. You're loving it. It's great. It just worked out perfect for you.
Yeah.
You adapted.
Yeah, totally.
That's
absolutely. And I think it's a I'm going to paraphrase a horrible cliche here, but you don't stop having adventures because you get old. I think you get old because you stop having adventures.
That's right.
And
that's a good way to put it.
Being willing to go out and try new things and risk failure is horrifyingly scary. But if you're never willing to be uncomfortable or risk failure, you're going to be stuck wherever you are. And if you're 18 and you're unwilling to have an adventure, you're going to be stuck there for the rest of your life. And if you're 80 and you're unwilling to be having adventure, well, okay, you're going to be pretty much in stasis. You're in God's waiting room at that point.
That's right. That's right. Well, Steve, thank you very much. Appreciate it greatly. And please come back after after I'm assuming you're still doing stand-up regularly, or
yeah. When I get out there, when I have the itch.
Okay. Well,
I'll come and see if I can do a set on Sunset Boulevard. Sure.
There you go. Or in New Jersey. We have comedy.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
But if you ever have a reason that you want to come back on the show, we'd love to have you for sure.
Awesome. Thanks very much. It's been great to chat with you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really interesting to talk to someone that's done the things you've done, and now you're from New Zealand. So yeah, fun.
Kia ora.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thanks very much, guys.
Take it easy, Steve.
Nice meeting you. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
All views expressed in this video belong to Kelly Nicholson, John D'Amore, and guests. These discussions do not represent the opinions of any entity whatsoever with which they have been affiliated now or will be in the future. The opinions expressed are solely theirs, and since they are critically thinking human beings, these views are subject to change, subject to revision, and subject to rethinking at any time. These conversations are not meant to be taken as advice and are only for the purpose of entertainment. All statements may be based on hearsay and not necessarily valid proof of any claims in this video. It is not our intention to teach or advise on any topic. Unless otherwise noted, all photos are public domain. Thanks for watching A Slice of Life with Kelly and John.